Happy New Year! Let's take a look at Old Tupi verbal alignment. The first thing I want you to look at is that Tupi has different person number inclusivity markers. So I want you to take a look that we have a first person singular and we have two plurals, changing the fact of whether the plural is including the third person or the second person. In the second person, we have a singular and a second person that also includes the third person, the second person plural. The third person is unmarked for plurality. It just shows us that there is no first or second person. It tells us nothing about plurality if there are multiple third persons or only one. If you're familiar with linguistics, you've probably heard the difference between a nominative-accusative aligned language versus an ergative-absolutive aligned. Basically, this chart will explain all of that to you. When you have a soul, S, soul, intransitive verb complement, only one argument to a verb, oftentimes we call that the subject, but that's not always semantically the case. That is often in English and Portuguese marked the same way morphologically as the agent, which we'll mark in green this whole time. Whereas this orangish color is going to be the patient. That's the accusative. In English, that's the difference between saying I versus me. Now, a language which is aligned ergative-absolutive will basically flip that on its head and say that intransitive verbs, or verbs with only one argument, will be marked the same as the patient. That means that transitive verbs, no matter what, are marking both the patient and the agent. Not always, but hypothetically, let's say that. Whereas here, we are either marking the same way as the patient or the same way as the agent. Old Tupi is split between these. The transitive verbs represent two different classes, which Navajo calls the first class and the second class, but we're going to call them active intransitive and stative intransitive, respectively. Aso, I went. Anyeeng, I spoke. Akaru, I ate. Each of these words are being used with active morphology because they are active intransitive verbs. They're things we do actively. Whereas being happy, being black, being beautiful, these are things which we cannot control. They are things which we are. They're states that we are. We can cause these states to happen, but inherently, when we are these states, they're stative verbs. So that's why we're going to use this word. And that's a general semantic division that we have between these two morphologies in the language, although it's not always so easy and cut clear with the semantic division. In Tupi, that looks like Sherorub, Sherun, Sheporang. As we go down, we can see what this might look like in English. If I say, I am happy, I am sad, you can see that that nominative accusative alignment happening here in English. Whereas if I say something causative like he made me happy, you can see now that I'm in the accusative. He made me happy. He made me happy. I am the target, the thematic target of this happiness state. And he is making me do it, right? He's causing me to become happy. So in English, hypothetically, we can just imagine what if there was an English morphology which instead of saying I am happy, which we could easily say in Tupi as well with a separate auxiliary verb, we had the option to just say me happy. And that was enough, which semantically it is enough. It's just not normative English. But semantically, I'm telling you that there's an accusative thing happening and happiness is what's happening, right? I'm letting you know that the happiness is happening to me in the accusative sense. So that's the idea of what it would look like if English had verbs like to be, which could be used in a stative or ergative sense. It would look like saying me happy or me sad because it's happening to us. Now let's take a look at transitive verbs. The case of transitive verbs gets a little bit more confusing. So let's take a look at these features. Morphological features are things inside information inherent to the words which tell us how the morphology is going to play out. And so as I showed before, karu, so, nyan, these verbs that are active are going to be marked actively. They're going to be marked for the agent. So because they only have one plus sign in this table, that means they're intransitive. This one, which has a plus sign for the patient, is still intransitive, but it's only being marked for the patient. You can see we have the agent here and we have the patients here. Let's not think about these two roads yet. So a transitive verb, by definition, then, is just a verb which has both an agent and a patient being marked. Now, whether that is going to get an active or stative morphology is much more complex than this small table can show. So let's move on to the next table. Now, the first thing I want you to see in this table is the rank. Now, these are not numbers. I'm not saying that 1 is greater than 2. I'm not breaking math. It's just shorthand for saying that the first person is greater than the second person, which is greater than the third person, because tupi has a person hierarchy. When we subvert this hierarchy, we use a stative morphology on the verb. When we agree with this hierarchy, when it's greater than or equal to the patient, the agent's valency or the value in this hierarchy, then we use active morphology. What does that look like? That means that I, Kian, me, the person speaking, is the most important person in terms of verbal morphological marking. That means that I'm going to talk about myself closest to the left of the verb as I can before I talk about you or someone else. Whether you're doing something to me or whether I'm doing something to you, I am going to get marked sooner to the left. So what does that look like? Oro moun. We saw this un up there with sherun. As a stative verb, it means I am black, sherun. But when we use it with this mo prefix, which makes it a causative, transitive verbs, because transitives are inherently causative in tupi, that means that we are going to have to put a patient. When 2 is the patient and 1 is the agent, you can see we have green, green, orange, orange, green, green, orange, orange. When we subvert it, we start to say green, orange, orange, green, green, orange, orange, green. It looks all messy. So those are the kind of concepts I want to communicate to you with this table. The first person morphologically, this is a portmanteau, but if you look at other tupi-guarani languages, and you can look at it yourself, this is just a YouTube video, you see that this P here morphologically means that the second person is getting marked after the first person. So it is a portmanteau, but for the purpose of this, we're going to say that it's second. But there are arguments to say that this should be greater than or equal to the first and the second person. But it doesn't really break anything whether you make it like that or not. So in our interpretation, we're going to say that this portmanteau is marking the first person first, which is this o, and then the ro is like the ere, and the po is like the pe, right? O po. Then if it's the first, second, or third person, since the third person always going to be less than or equal to the agent in this case, we have an active morphology. It's very straightforward. This is generally what is taught to people as the way that you conjugate verbs in tupi. And then they leave out all the rest of these other ways, even though it's all the indicative method. There's no way around this. You have to learn it all. Tupi is such a complex, rich language. So that's the reason I'm showing this, is because this is often shown as the only way. And then these are like offshoot weird mode. No, this is all the indicative mood. It's all this. You have to know all of this in order to be able to say any sentence or any verb conjugation in the language. So now that we've established that this is the whole indicative mood here, what we have to do is we have to go down and say, okay, what happens if the patient 2 is less than 1? Well, what happens then is that we get shemun yepe. We notice the she is being marked with stative patient morphology here, right? And the moun, you made me black. You painted me with genipapu. Moun literally means to make black, but in the literature we see it's used as the verb for painting with genipapu. Genipapu in Brazil is a fruit. It's pretty delicious. You can drink the juice of it and eat it, but you can also make this black paint that stains your skin for like 2 weeks. And so they use this verb moun to say you painted me. So she moun yepe, you painted me. Oro moun, I painted you. Opo moun, I painted y'all. I painted all of you. I moun, I painted him, her, or them. Ere moun, you painted him, her, them. Oi moun, he or she or them painted him, her, or them. Right? Other him, her, them. Oroi moun, We, me and him, painted them, or him, or her. Yaimon, you and me, and maybe somebody else, painted him, her, or them with Jenny Papo, black. Paymon, y'all painted him, her, or them, uh, black with Jenny Papo. So these are the ways that we say it in the active morphology. And you'll notice if it's the third person acting upon the first or second person, it's the same exact thing, but then we add in the yande, nde, mpe, all of these pronouns which include the second person, right? Because yande, even though it's a first person inclusive, all that means is it's at a minimum the first person and the second person. So in a way, it is somehow a second person and a first person at the same time. There's a diagram for that. Maybe I'll put it at the end of this video, maybe not. So what we see is that the morphology, the state of morphology is exactly the same. The only difference is here we use the proper noun, a demonstrative or pronoun, whereas here we have these frozen pronouns. Instead of saying ende or peen, we have to say yepe or peyepe. But that's it. Otherwise, it's the same thing. And also, this can't go in the front. In the third person, it can go in the front. You can say Pedro Shemoun or Shemoun Pedro, but you cannot say Yepe Shemoun. So it's not exactly the same. There's a little bit more constrictions in the second, which is why I put it in its own box. It's not exactly the same. But this is the general idea of how the Tupi transitive verbal alignment goes. Not only is there a split between intransitive verbs in active and stative morphology, but there is also a split conditioned on the valency of the participants of discourse in the rank of whether or not the transitive verb is going to experience an active or stative morphology. And all of this can be gleaned from Anchieta's grammar from the 16th century. So, when I recently hear people saying that the Jesuits simplified Old Tupi and that they changed, like this is very similar to how many other Tupi-Guarani languages work. It's very much similar. There's no question about it. It's very complex, and it's not something that the Jesuits could have made up unless they truly had God telling them in their ears exactly how all this stuff worked, right? That's the only way that they could have made this stuff up. So it's really impressive, and it's really fun to study this stuff when you see how complex some verbal systems are compared to English and Portuguese. Tchau, valeu, falou.